Joni Mitchell. The name alone brings to mind a world of breathtaking music, lyrics that cut right to the bone, and a voice that practically defined the singer-songwriter. She's a titan, a poet and a painter with a guitar. But running right alongside that legacy of genius is another reputation, that of a brutally honest, unfiltered, and often scathing critic of her peers and the industry that made her famous. For decades, Joni has simply refused to play the game, and in doing so, she's left behind a trail of shocking opinions that reveal more about her than any hit song ever could. Now, before we get into it, let's be clear about the title. Joni Mitchell never sat down and published a formal, ranked list of the 5 musicians she hates most. That's not her style. This isn't about petty feuds, it's something much deeper. What we do have is a decades-long public record of interviews and off-the-cuff remarks that, when you piece them together, paint a vivid picture of the artists who, in her eyes, betrayed the very artistic principles she holds sacred. These aren't just casual dislikes. They're profound artistic and philosophical throwdowns. By exploring her most pointed criticisms, we can unlock what makes Joni Mitchell tick: her ferocious commitment to originality and her absolute disdain for anything fake. These are the stories behind the musicians who found themselves on the receiving end of Joni Mitchell's legendary honesty, the artists who, for one reason or another, she simply could not stand. And through these clashes, we find the fiery heart of a true, uncompromising artist. In a 2010 interview with the Los Angeles Times, the conversation turned to the 1960s folk scene. When the interviewer brought up Bob Dylan, born Robert Zimmerman, Joni Mitchell didn't just offer an opinion, she dropped a bomb. "Bob is not authentic at all," she said flat out. "He's a plagiarist, and his name and voice are fake. Everything about Bob is a deception. We are like night and day, he and I." The statement was so blunt, so completely dismissive of a fellow icon, it sent shockwaves through the music world. It wasn't just a critique, it was an artistic indictment, and it was just the tip of the iceberg. Today, we're uncovering the deeply personal reasons and artistic clashes that led Joni Mitchell to publicly condemn some of music's biggest names. To understand the friction between Joni Mitchell and Judy Collins, you have to go back to the mid-1960s. The folk scene was a vibrant, competitive, and overwhelmingly male world. For a young woman songwriter to survive, she needed a voice that was undeniably her own. Joni, fresh from the Canadian prairies, had exactly that. She was writing songs with a complexity and emotional depth that were just on another level. But in the folk scene, songs got passed around. Before you even had a record deal, a more established artist might perform your work. It was a way for a song to get noticed, but it was also a way for a songwriter to lose control of their own creation. This is the story of both sides now. In 1967, a 23-year-old Joni wrote a song of almost supernatural wisdom, inspired by a line in a Saul Bellow novel. It was a masterpiece about losing innocence. At the time, Joni didn't even have a record deal. As the story goes, musician Al Cooper heard the song and was so blown away, he called Judy Collins in the middle of the night so Joni could play it for her over the phone. Collins, already a folk star, was captivated. She said she wept when she first heard it. Collins recorded Both Sides Now for her 1967 album, Wildflowers. Her polished version, with its memorable harpsichord, was a massive hit. It climbed the charts and won Collins a Grammy in 1969. For most of the world, Both Sides Now became a Judy Collins song. And that was the problem. Joni Mitchell, the song's creator, had to watch from the sidelines as her deeply personal work became forever linked to another artist's voice. While there was never a public feud, the incident created a lasting professional tension. It's been widely reported that Mitchell disliked Collins's popular version, finding it too slick and commercial. More than that, it was about artistic ownership. Mitchell's own recording wouldn't come out until her 1969 album, Clouds. an album literally named after a lyric in the song. For years, she had to deal with people thinking she was covering a Judy Collins song. She once recalled people marveling that Judy Collins let her sing her song. This wasn't about royalties. For an artist as fiercely individual as Joni, it was about her voice and her perspective being scooped. In a world where she was already fighting to be seen as a creator, not just a girl singer, having her signature work defined by someone else was a deep frustration. For her part, Judy Collins has always been gracious, praising Mitchell's genius. She once told Joni, "You can break my heart anytime you like, just open your mouth and sing." But for Joni, the experience seemed to harden her resolve to protect her art at all costs. It was an early, painful lesson in how the music industry could dilute an artist's identity. The run-in between Joni Mitchell and John Lennon wasn't some long, drawn-out feud. It was more like a chemical explosion, a brief, combustible meeting of two titans that left a mark on Mitchell she'd talk about for decades. The scene is Los Angeles in 1974, during Lennon's infamous Lost Weekend, an 18-month stretch away from Yoko Ono that was filled with rock and roll excess. Joni was in a totally different world, meticulously crafting her masterpiece album, Court and Spark. As fate would have it, she and Lennon were working in the same recording studio, right across the hall. Out of professional courtesy, Joni decided to play some of her new, jazz-inflected material for the former Beatle. Lennon's reaction wasn't exactly supportive. Instead, it was condescending and dismissive. As Mitchell later recounted, Lennon listened and then told her, "Oh, it's all a product of overeducation. You want a hit, don't you? Put some fiddles on it." To Lennon, the working-class hero from Liverpool who built his legend on raw rock and roll, Mitchell's complex chords and poetic lyrics probably seemed pretentious. His advice to put some fiddles on it was a jab at what he saw as her music's lack of everyman accessibility. For Mitchell, a fiercely intelligent and self-taught musician, the comment was a profound insult. It wasn't just a critique. It was a dismissal of her entire artistic philosophy. Decades later, she diagnosed the encounter with surgical precision, framing it as a matter of class anxiety on Lennon's part. "That's a class difficulty he had," Mitchell explained. "He's a working-class lad. He was afraid that he was betraying his class." In her eyes, Lennon wasn't just being a jerk. He was acting out an insecurity, lashing out at what he couldn't understand. The story gets a little more complicated thanks to May Pang, Lennon's girlfriend at the time. In her book, Pang claimed Mitchell had been a bit flirtatious towards Lennon in the studio, making him uncomfortable, and that eventually neither of them were in the mood for her. But whether it was a case of bad flirting or artistic intimidation, the encounter stuck with Mitchell. She saw Lennon's jab as a kind of inverted snobbery, a suspicion of intellect that she found incredibly limiting. For her, art wasn't about sticking to a persona, whether it was the folk singer her early fans wanted or the working-class hero Lennon embodied. It was about relentless evolution. That brief, tense meeting became a perfect illustration of what set her apart. She refused to be confined by anyone's expectations, least of all John Lennon's. The clash between Joni Mitchell and Taylor Swift is a modern one, born not from studio rivalries but from a single high-profile project, the proposed biopic of Joni's life. This story isn't about two artists who personally dislike each other. In fact, Mitchell has admitted she's never even heard Taylor Swift's music. Instead, it's about what Swift represented to Mitchell, a symbol of a new generation of image-focused pop that stood against everything her career was built on. Back in 2012, news broke that Taylor Swift was up for the role of Joni Mitchell in a film based on the book Girls Like Us. On the surface, you could almost see it. Swift was a huge singer-songwriter, and as Mitchell herself later admitted, there was a passing physical resemblance. But for Joni, the idea was dead on arrival. In A 2014 interview, she revealed her blunt reaction to the idea. "I squelched that," she declared. "I said to the producer, 'All you've got is a girl with high cheekbones.'" The quote was devastating. It reduced Taylor Swift, one of the biggest stars on the planet, to a set of facial features implying a total lack of substance. Mitchell then tore into the film's source material, calling it a lot of gossip and nonsense. Her issue wasn't just with the actress, it was with Hollywood trying to package and sell her life story. She saw casting Swift not as a search for someone who could embody her fierce artistic spirit, but as a commercial calculation based on looks and bankability. In a later interview, she doubled down, admitting, "I've never heard Taylor's music." She then offered a backhanded compliment that was dripping with sarcasm. "I've seen her. Physically, she looks similarly small-hipped and high cheekbones. I can see why they cast her. I don't know what her music sounds like, but I do know this, that if she's going to sing and play me, good luck." That good luck was a clear challenge to anyone who thought they could replicate her unique guitar tunings, her winding melodies, and the raw honesty of her voice. In Joni's world, Taylor Swift, with her massive success and carefully managed image, was the ultimate symbol of a new paradigm she couldn't stand. The biopic incident was the perfect flashpoint, a moment where Joni Mitchell's old guard values of pure, unvarnished art collided with the new guard reality of celebrity, branding, and high cheekbones. If Joni Mitchell's other critiques were surgical strikes, her comments on Madonna were a scorched earth campaign. For Mitchell, Madonna wasn't just another artist. She was the walking, talking embodiment of everything that had gone wrong with the music industry and pop culture. In a 2010 interview, she drew a line in the sand with historical grandeur. "Americans have decided to be stupid and shallow since 1980. Madonna is like Nero. She marks the turning point." Comparing the Queen of Pop to the emperor who fiddled while Rome burned wasn't a casual insult. It was a damning indictment of an entire era. Her criticism of Madonna is one of her most consistent themes. In 2002, she delivered one of her most famous takedowns. "She has knocked the importance of talent out of the arena," Mitchell stated. "She's manufactured. She's made a lot of money and become the biggest star in the world by hiring the right people. This cuts right to the heart of their artistic opposition." Mitchell, the solitary genius who wrote and composed her own deeply personal work, saw Madonna as a corporate creation, a triumph of marketing over musicianship. She saw the rise of MTV, a landscape Madonna mastered, as the moment when music became burlesque. The focus shifted from the song to the spectacle. In a 1991 interview, she argued that artists like Madonna reduced women to objects, even if they were in control of their own image. Yet someone like Madonna can be seen as a feminist hero because she's exploiting her own sexuality rather than being exploited by some man, Mitchell said. "Who's being exploited there? The audience is being exploited." To Mitchell, this wasn't empowerment. It was just a high-gloss version of the same old objectification, and it made for a terrible role model. Over the years, the insults got more personal. She called Madonna a living Barbie doll, but a little bit on the blue side. She rejected any connection to the pop star, even though Madonna had once cited Mitchell as an inspiration. When asked what she'd have to do to be as popular as Madonna, Mitchell's response was dripping with contempt. "What would I do? Show my tits, grab my crotch, get hair extensions and a choreographer? It's not my world." This wasn't just about musical taste. It was a philosophical war. Joni came from a tradition where authenticity was everything. You wrote your own truth, you bled on the tracks. In her view, Madonna represented a new, cynical age where persona was everything and talent was optional. While many see Madonna as a brilliant pop artist and a master of self-reinvention, Mitchell saw her as patient zero for a cultural plague that devalued genuine creativity. We started with Bob Dylan. And we have to end with him, because Joni Mitchell's critique of Dylan is her most profound and revealing. It's an attack on an icon she once admired, and it strikes at the very heart of what she values most: authenticity. Her infamous 2010 interview laid the charges bare. Bob is not authentic at all. He's a plagiarist. His name and voice are fake. Everything about Bob is a deception. Let's break that down. First, his name and voice are fake. This is deeper than Robert Zimmerman becoming Bob Dylan. For Joni, it was about the construction of a persona she found totally phony. She later elaborated, saying, "He's borrowed his voice from old hillbillies. He has invented a character to deliver his songs. It's a mask of sorts." To Mitchell, whose own voice is so unmistakably hers, Dylan's stylized, nasal delivery and folk poet persona were just a costume. Second, the bombshell. He's a plagiarist. She was referring to long-standing observations that Dylan borrowed heavily from other sources without credit, from old folk melodies to lines from a Japanese novel. While defenders call this part of the grand folk tradition, Mitchell saw it as theft. For an artist who agonized over every word, lifting lines was the ultimate artistic sin. It proved in her mind that his creative well wasn't as deep as everyone thought. And finally, the summation. Everything about Bob is a deception. This is the final nail in the coffin, tying the fake voice and plagiarized lines into a single verdict. The icon is a fraud. What makes this so potent is their shared history. They toured together during the Rolling Thunder Review, but getting closer only seemed to sharpen her critique. She once complained about sharing a mic with him because he never brushes his teeth. A small, petty detail that speaks volumes about her visceral rejection of him. A few years after the interview that set the world on fire, Mitchell did try to soften her comments, blaming the interviewer for taking her out of context. But even in her clarification, the core critique remained. She admitted, "I like a lot of Bob's songs," but immediately added, "Musically, he's not very gifted." She just couldn't bring herself to validate him as a peer. Dylan represents the absolute opposite of the Mitchell doctrine. Her journey was about stripping away artifice to find a raw, uncomfortable truth. She saw his journey as the opposite, building layers of myth and borrowed cool. In her eyes, he was the ultimate imposter, and for Joni Mitchell, the ultimate truth-teller. There is no greater crime. So, after all these epic artistic clashes, what's the takeaway? It's clear her critiques, however sharp, don't come from simple jealousy. They're the fierce, protective roars of an artist guarding something sacred. For Joni Mitchell, music isn't entertainment. It's not a product. It's a calling that demands absolute, unflinching authenticity. Judy Collins represented the loss of artistic ownership. John Lennon symbolized a fear of intellect that tried to put her in a box. Taylor Swift became the face of a new generation where image threatened to swallow substance. Madonna was the Nero of an era that, as she put it, knocked the importance of talent out of the arena. And Bob Dylan, the folk god himself, was the ultimate apostate, a deception, who betrayed the truth-telling ethos of their craft. The common thread is her militant devotion to originality. She has spent her life fighting to be more than a chick singer, fighting for control against a corrupt cesspool of an industry, and fighting to push her music into new, challenging places, no matter the cost. Her legendary broadsides aren't just the cranky opinions of a legend. They are declarations of war from one of the last true believers in the power of pure, unmanufactured art. So what do you think? Is Joni Mitchell a fearless truth-teller holding artists to a higher standard? Or is she an overly harsh critic who's too quick to dismiss others? And are there any other artists she famously went after that you think should be on this list? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe for more stories behind the music. Thanks for watching.